Hello, it's a while since I've done a video, but I thought I'd just do a short one for this special occasion. February the 12th is Charles Darwin's birthday. He was born February the 12th, 1809. And in this regard, apparently, the atheist church was formed in Hungary last year. And on this special occasion, they're holding their first demonstration in Budapest with the theme, "Evolution is true, the Bible is a fairy tale," roughly translated. Really? Okay, I think there's some Christians planning on perhaps representing a different viewpoint on this same occasion, of course, without wanting to cause any real problems or fights or riots or anything like that. However, on this same occasion, it has been for several years, I believe, also on February the 12th, it has been announced as Question Evolution Day International. And so this is the particular occasion that I'd like to make a video for. Ian Juby of Wazulu, who hosts a weekly, when he can, television show, which is also on YouTube, about creation and evolution, can be found under Wazulu. I'll post a link below. It's worth watching. There, some excellent stuff there. He suggested that people might make a video for their own social network on the theme of question evolution. Do we have a question, or any possible way that we might want to question evolution? Well, my particular question involves radioactive dating methods, and in particular C14. Now, in connection with the theory of evolution, of course, is the idea that the universe is billions of years old, and even the Earth is supposed to be something like 4.5 billion years old. That's an American billion, of course, not an English billion. It will be 4.5 thousand million years old. At least it was when I was growing up, but that's another petty little irritation. Anyway, let's call it 4.5 billion years old. And this, therefore, is assumed in all methods, in all ideas of evolution, because, of course, you need some sort of spurious idea that maybe if the world's been around long enough, then evolution's had enough time to happen. Of course, evolution would never happen if you gave it 50 million times as long as that, because it's unscientific and impossible. But it gives that sort of spurious idea to the support evolution, that the world is billions of years old. However, if the world is just thousands of years old, which is what the Bible says, not the Bible, then it really would be manifestly impossible. So where do we get this? What do we support the ideas of billions of years from? Well, one thing, of course, is the geological layers, which is circular reasoning, because they're dated in accordance with evolutionary speculation anyway. But another method is radiometric dating methods, usually involving the long-lived isotopes, uranium, potassium argon, uranium lead, rubidium strontium. But there is another radioactive dating method which I particularly want to talk about now, which is carbon-14. Now, carbon-14 cannot be used even theoretically to measure millions of years, but it is something that is used to measure shorter times for matter which has once been alive. So I suppose I better explain that. Carbon-14 has a half-life of 5,730 years, and all living material and once living material contains carbon. The amount of naturally occurring carbon, the stuff that occurs in all living things, is about 99% carbon-12, 1% carbon-13, and 10 to the minus 12% of carbon-14. So there's very, very little there. Carbon-12 and carbon-13 are quite naturally occurring. They're not radioactive. You can't be used in dating methods. Carbon-13 is used in nuclear magnetic resonance studies, which It's very useful in chemistry, but that's beside the point. Carbon-14 is assumed to be at a steady state in the biosphere, which it actually isn't, but well, that's what it's assumed for radiometric dating methods. And the reason for that is that carbon-14 is being formed in the atmosphere. Now, carbon-12 has got 6 protons and 6 neutrons in the nucleus. Nitrogen-14 has got 7 protons and 7 neutrons. Now, by the action of cosmic radiation, some of the nitrogen-14 gets transformed into carbon-14. That means that one of the protons gets turned into a neutron. So now it has 6 protons and 8 neutrons, and that's unstable. And therefore it undergoes radioactive decay by beta decay, which means one of the neutrons gets transformed back into a proton, and and goes back to nitrogen-14. Yes, with a half-life of about 5,500 years, as I mentioned. Then the carbon-14 formed in the atmosphere combines with oxygen, gets turned into carbon dioxide, gets absorbed by plants, and then animals eat plants, and men eat plants and animals that have eaten plants, and so we end up with carbon-14 as part of our bodies. So that means we're radioactive, but as I say, it's a very, very small amount, and it's not that dangerous because it's only beta decay, whereas the other two decay kinds of days are more dangerous. And it's assumed that the amount of carbon-14 being formed in the atmosphere is equal to the amount being lost by radioactive decay. Therefore, there's a steady state. Living things have a steady state amount of carbon-14 in them, but when they die, they're not taking any more extra carbon in, and therefore the carbon-14 starts to decay, and there's less and less and less as the stuff gets older. So if something's been dead for 5,500 years, it's assumed then it will have half the amount of carbon-14 it had in it when it died, and this is the basis of the radioactive dating method. Okay, so carbon-14 can't be used for dating rocks which are millions of years old, because it would all be gone anyway. In fact, it is used for dating, say, human artifacts, human settlements. The main problem is that anything that's over 1 million years old would have absolutely no carbon-14 in whatsoever at the present decay rate and the present amount of carbon-14 in the atmosphere, taking those as an assumption. For example, if the whole world were the same mass but every single atom was carbon-14, there wouldn't be one single atom left after 1 million years. So if any biological material that is tested has carbon-14 in it, according to science, according to experimental science, one would indicate that that is less than 1 million years old. Okay, that seems fair enough. That's according to the known methods, repeatable experiments of experimental science, and not according to some sort of speculative fairy tale. Okay? Now for the interesting part. For many years, nobody ever bothered testing things like coal, which has got lots and lots of carbon in it, oil, likewise, natural gas, fossilized bones, ancient fossils, because, well, it's obvious there's not going to be any carbon-14 in any of those, because they're millions and millions of years old. However, more recently, scientists have started to test these things just as a matter of curiosity, with some rather interesting results. For instance, coal, which is supposed to be definitely over 1 million years old, but anything up to about 300 million years old, whenever it's tested, and whichever type of coal it is, and whatever layer it comes from, it always has detectable carbon-14 in it. Likewise, natural gas and oil, which is supposed to be also millions, hundreds of millions of years old. Interestingly enough, diamonds have been tested recently. Now, diamonds are supposedly, according to conventional theories, anything up to 2 billion years old, but they've all got carbon-14 in them. And even fossils, such as ammonites, hundreds of millions of years old, dinosaur bones, 65 million years old minimum, have also been tested and found to contain carbon-14. Not to mention, of course, in terms of dinosaur bones, that dinosaur bones have also been found going back to the 70s, so I mean this is not like yesterday, which have got soft tissue in them, blood vessels, they're not fossilized, they're fresh. Some have even got detectable DNA in them, which would indicate, I think, that they are not really that old. DNA doesn't hang around for millions of years. That's scientific. It doesn't happen. Anyway. So, the facts, therefore, this can all be checked out. I'm not giving you any references here. This is a quick video. But if you Google it, C14 in coal, C14 in diamonds, C14 in dinosaur bones, you'll find stuff on the net. And if you find it yourself, then it's it's not just me saying it. This is published in scientific journals, often ignored, of course, because what do you do with it? Anyway, detectable amounts of carbon-14 in coal, gas, oil, diamonds, dinosaur bones, and fossils, which would be a very strong indication, according to real, experimental, laboratory, repeatable science, that these cannot be millions of years old. They can only be thousands of years old. There are excuses, of course, which are brought up. Really, it's just two excuses are made for this, because people don't like having the worldview questioned, do they? Or they don't like processing information which doesn't fit into an existing paradigm. One is that, well, they must be contaminated with modern carbon. However, the amounts of carbon-14 that are found, say, in coal and diamonds, which are subject to very strict preparation methods before they're actually tested, and also blanks are tested to make sure that there's no background carbon-14 getting in there, would indicate that there is detectable carbon-14 in there. The contamination argument doesn't really work. Diamond, for example, of course, diamond is made up of a very rigid lattice of tetrahedral carbon atoms all connected to one another in a massive sort of lattice, and there's no way that external carbon could get into the inside of that, because it's the hardest substance known. And so carbon taken the inside of a diamond and then tested cannot be contaminated. And it's still got carbon-14 in it. And the other excuse is that, for example, with coal, that there must be some sort of uranium or other radioactive material deposits nearby which are pumping out neutrons, and of course as the neutron hits a nitrogen-14 atom, it would transform it into a carbon-14, so carbon-14 is being produced in the coal in situ. Once again, you would need more uranium than you've got coal for that to actually happen, which isn't there, and coal, which is nowhere near any kind of uranium deposits, likewise has the carbon-14 in it, so that doesn't really work either. You can check out all this stuff. Then, so the question raised, therefore, is, how can there be detectable carbon-14 in all these deposits if they are really millions of years old? And if they are not millions of years old, how can evolution be supported? Maybe it's evolution that's a fairy tale.